Joe Biden couldn't have been more clear. He said unambiguously and explicitly that climate change will be at the centre of his presidency. Does this put any more pressure on Australia?
No, Laura, we welcome the United States to the Paris Agreement. They haven't been parties to the Paris Agreement as we have, and of course we welcome them to it as they sign up, which they clearly will, and that's good news, and we'll work with them very closely on a range of different issues. Look, Joe Biden has said he's going to double down on carbon capture and storage, which is great news. It's a technology which is developing and being deployed very, very rapidly. 58 projects across the world, almost half of those in the United States, the biggest one here in Australia. And we'll work closely with them on that technology, hydrogen technology. Gas, of course, is an important part of this story. And, you know, the fastest growing gas region in the United States is in Pennsylvania, where Joe Biden comes from. And he heard a very clear message from Pennsylvania during the election campaign that that was important to their economy. And I'm very confident he will back in the gas industry in the United States. So these are lots of areas for us to work very closely with the United States. They're obviously an important crucial strategic ally for us, a good friend of Australia, and they'll continue to be on this issue, as with many others.
You didn't mention renewables there, but Joe Biden has also made it very clear that he is a big fan of renewables. John Kerry, in his speech earlier this morning, explicitly said that he will be asking allies to do more. I assume that includes us.
Well, we're investing in renewables 4 times faster than the United States, Laura, so we really look forward to the United States playing catch-up on this. We'll work with them closely, of course, because a whole range of technologies. We're leading the world in the deployment of household solar, for instance, 1 in 4 houses in Australia. And the great challenge for us and the United States as we do this is to make sure we have enough dispatchable generation in the system, which is why I mentioned the importance of gas and hydrogen. They play a crucial role in doing that, and working together with other allies across the world, countries across the world, to make sure we get balance in our energy systems, that we have the technologies that are working, and that we can actually bring down emissions without taxing people, without raising the price of electricity, without imposing costs on consumers and economic burdens. And that's what we all want to see here, Laura. That is, you know, we will not get there globally unless we are able to do that, because countries like India and the other parts of the developing world will not impose big economic burdens on their populations. We can't expect them to. Yeah. And that means technology, not taxation, Laura. That's our focus. That's been the United States focus. Technology is absolutely central to the United States economy and has been for a long while. So we look forward to working with them very closely.
This seems like a very good segue into some comments that Matt Keane has made in recent days. He says he's on the side of consumers when it comes to cheaper energy and has accused you of being on the side of vested interest.
Well, he hasn't done that. You should actually have a look at those comments very carefully. Okay. And you know what?
It seemed like
I'm not getting Chris. Well, he hasn't said that, Laura. He hasn't said that. So please be accurate. But what I will say. I'm not getting Christmas cards from the big energy companies because we've held them to account, but we also need to make sure that state governments are doing the right thing. And premature closure of coal-fired power stations will raise the price of electricity. We've seen it in Victoria with Hazelwood, where we saw a very sharp increase in wholesale prices, near doubling of wholesale prices as the result of a coal-fired power station leaving without replacement. And our point to the New South Wales government is we've got to make sure anything that any state government does avoids that premature closure, doesn't freeze out investment. We need to make sure that the important projects like the Newcastle gas peaker that AGL's working on, or the Tallawarra gas generator that Energy Australia is working on, we need to make sure those projects happen and aren't frozen out by state government policy. So we'll work closely with the New South Wales government to make sure that happens. We need to make sure their policies are in line with lower prices, affordable energy, jobs in manufacturing. That's our focus, as well as bringing down emissions, and they're coming down very fast, Laura.
I wonder who you thought he was referring to when he accused, perhaps not you, but someone of being on the side of vested interests as well. And I would ask you, Matt King keeps on saying that he has modelled this. He's not budging when it comes to the plan, even though he's been urged to do so. What is wrong with his modelling?
Well, we haven't seen it, so I can't answer that question. I tell you what I will say, though, is that any state government that has a plan for coal-fired power stations to leave prematurely, or where that's the unintended consequence of their plan, will raise prices. We've seen it in South Australia, we've seen it in Victoria, and so we're resolute in making sure that closure of power stations is not premature, that they're replaced with firm dispatchable energy, which keeps the prices down. So that's our position. So
he has said that 4 of New South Wales' largest 5 coal-fired generators are scheduled to close within the next 15 years. Is that a reasonable time frame?
Well, they're scheduled closure dates. What I'm talking about is premature closure and not replacing. Look, we've got one coming up, and this is a good example. Liddell in New South Wales, scheduled for 2023. Our position's always been very, very clear: either life extension or replacement. AGL doesn't want to pursue life extension, so we've said replacement. Now, we've got 2 generators that are being planned. They're well progressed. Indeed, I know prior to the New South Wales government announcement that they were well advanced in their plans. We've said that we'll fill any remaining gap through Snowy, and we want to see those proceed. Now, they've put those projects on hold, both companies. We'd like to see them go ahead. We must see replacement. We've seen this before. We've seen this movie before several times, Laura. We know what happens. You were around in the press gallery when Hazelwood shut. Yep. The prices went up. It's very simple. We can't see that. Look, this is a clear proposition. I don't think there's any ambiguity or uncertainty on our position and the reasonableness of that position. And I'm also confident we can work with the New South Wales government to make sure we get the right outcome here.
Just very quickly on Narrabri, final approval was given to this $3.6 billion project yesterday. It's very controversial. All gas extracted from this, I understand, is going to be for domestic use. Is it financially viable? Is it financially viable without government intervention?
Well, we're not subsidising Narrabri. I mean, they're getting on with it. It's great news. More supply, lower energy prices. That's not controversial, Laura. That's good news. And it's good news for Australian manufacturers. 850,000 people work in manufacturing in this great country, many in New South Wales, of course. Gas is crucial for manufacturing, for energy, but also for feedstock, for producing critical goods like fertiliser, which happens in Newcastle, of course, relying on gas. So it's good to see more gas coming on. More gas, more supply equals lower prices. That's how markets work. They always have. There's some out there trying to defy gravity, arguing that doesn't happen. Well, that's what does happen in all commodity markets.
Well, that was Malcolm
Turnbull. So it's just fantastic to see that. Well, there's lots of people who've been running around saying that. It just makes no sense. So, look, more supply, downward pressure on prices, more jobs in manufacturing, jobs at Narrabri, 1,200 jobs during construction, $120 million for a community fund, very strict conditions on water in particular, which is good news. Let's get on with it. These are the sorts of projects that drive jobs and recovery as we come out of the pandemic.